maybe I can talk a bit about my background while the slides are kind of coming on. Yeah, no problem. Before Basilic Fly Studio, I was with Double Negative or DNEG, so for the last 17 years, I started on the artist side. I came through the sort of camera tracking departments. I've worked across most of the 3D departments in creature, layout. Thank you. You can see it. And eventually turning towards pipeline in about 2010, traveling through like pipeline development roles, pipeline supervisor, head of pipeline across the Redefined division, which has offices in Hyderabad, actually. DNEG has multiple offices in India as well. And then in March, I started with Basilic Fly Studio, and my mission was to try and develop a pipeline from the ground up, taking a studio that doesn't have a pipeline, has kind of independent locations, and trying to provide a globally connected global pipeline with our two main missions of being full end-to-end automation and looking into innovation with new technologies across machine learning, AI, and other areas. So I'll be going through, I'll be playing a reel around the journey so far for Basilic. We'll be taking a quick look at some of the key technology trends that we're trying to follow and catch up on. We're talking a bit about building a platform, so I'll go into more detail on what a platform is and what we're actually doing to get it in place. And I'll then be talking about the next steps from where we are now and looking a bit further forwards as to the future goals and what we plan to do there. Okay, so our journey so far, if you can play the reel, please. So there should be a reel as well in the same folder. Thank you. So just to recap, some of that was fast-moving. Basilic Fly was founded in 2013, and so we've been around for about 10 years now. Predominantly, we've been working in the 2D area, so we've been working rotoscope, prep, match move, and camera compositing. We've worked on about 10,000 projects, more than 10,000 projects overall. So we've done around 900 film-based projects, 2,000 episodic projects, and 8,000 commercial projects across 300 different clients. We expanded to Vancouver, and then more recently, we've been expanding to London, and we've started up a 3D division of the company, looking to provide full visual effects across multiple industries. And then we've invested a lot in technology and pipeline, trying to drive that forward again to become a globally scaling automated company that's looking towards innovation. And recently in September, we also had a record-breaking IPO in the small and medium enterprise market in the Indian stock markets. So technology trends, I mean, there are a lot of technology trends. I mean, everything that I'll be talking today is going to be very service level. I'll be touching on lots of different items, and if you would like to learn more about these things, do go and look into them. Feel free to add me to LinkedIn. I'm happy to have discussions on technology with anybody at any time. These are just some of them. So we're starting with a platform and looking to have OpenPipe to begin with. We were considering writing a proprietary pipeline from scratch, but to meet our more immediate production needs, we needed to get something in place sooner. OpenPipe is an open source pipeline, and it provides some work file publishing and render publishing, geometry publishing, and allows us to kind of get some basic publishing going from Maya, Houdini, Nuke, and from there, our plans are to sort of extend upon that and go into USD. Moving on to OpenUSD. USD is a scene description format. You can think of it mostly as a way of referencing files to pass data from one department to the next, but it is quite a lot more than that too. It provides a lot of layering capabilities. You can really compose asset USD files that contain multiple sub-USD files to describe models, textures, shaders, etc. And then across your shot stream, you can then make modifications per department, making new USD files and making a shot USD file at the very end that you can then open up in a different department. Open review. Recently, there's been two major pushes to open source review tools. So Autodesk have pushed RV into the open review space, and DNEG also pushed XStudio into the same space. A lot of these things come under the ASWF, or the Academy for Software Foundation. OpenUSD actually comes under a separate alliance of different vendors. Again, NVIDIA, Autodesk, and the like have come together with Pixar to try to combine efforts and produce one single open source USD framework that people can build on top of. We're also looking at things like OpenTimeline.io, OpenColor.io, etc. So plenty of open source initiatives out there. If you would like to have something to start with, you can kind of look to use these things and build up from there. Real-time, of course, has been making its way into VFX quite heavily. Lots of movement on the virtual production side of things. Getting companies to be involved much earlier in the production cycle, so not just in post-production now, but actually in pre-production, actually helping to direct the project and to help the directors make decisions earlier in the project to make the post-production easier later on. Virtual cameras and like CG sets and being able to kind of scout those camera moves at the beginning of the project, like volumes to kind of record against and really help the directors get their vision early on. Previs used to be in Maya, used to not necessarily use pipeline, used to use rigs outside of the pipeline, but moving to sort of Unreal has been a thing that Previs departments have been doing recently as well. So taking the benefits of real-time applications and not having to worry about sometimes the constraints of the more typical linear-based pipelines. Layout, it's got a very good sequencing in applications like Unreal as well, so you can create your environment, make your layout at a sequence level, and then you can create shots underneath that. So layout has become something that we can also take from other applications and push into a space that does these things differently. And then final pixel in rendering as well, so CG full animation projects for sure can be rendered fully final pixel. You can get a lot of different styles in applications like Unreal and Unity. We have worked on projects before where you can do final render in typical VFX movies as well. It's not quite the same as using a physically based render and using ray tracing to get photorealism, but it's getting closer all of the time and is definitely closed the gap quite a lot. AI and ML, so these are the big ones that everybody's looking at the moment. We might think of these things as, with like the generative machine learning that's going on at the moment, kind of creating the actual content, creating the images, but really we can use these things in a number of different areas. So we can use it to take the data that we're storing around our resource usage, maybe business information, and we can do analysis across these, and machine learning can help us to spot patterns in our data to predict future growth, things like that. Tools, of course, then, so maybe not necessarily making the images, but providing tools to help the artists actually make the images. Sometimes AI can't get you all the way there, but using the tools and allowing artists to kind of feed attributes or parameters into those tools to then utilize the machine learning still provides a space for an artist to be the actual driver and AI to be the tool, not to take over from the artist directly. Developers as well, ChatGPT and things like this allow you to kind of create a prompt and to help you to create potentially a skeleton API. It can provide code. It doesn't necessarily always run, so you still need to have strong developers that can actually create good prompts in the first place to kind of get a good starting place, but then you're going to go into cycles, take that code into like an application, run it. It may not work. You have to kind of help the AI debug things and create a sort of loop, and eventually you'll probably take it over to push it out the door. It's not going to provide full development for you. Support's another area, so taking wikis and sort of or your user documentations for your department workflows, for tool documentations, and rather than using a sort of typical search or using a wiki sort of hierarchy to try and navigate exactly where you want to get to, you can use a AI-based chatbot or something like that that's being trained on your data sets, and you can simply ask it a question on how do I do this thing in my department, and it can give you the answer directly back as if you were talking to a supervisor. Sustainability, not necessarily so much of a trend. There's ethical sustainability, so trying to use partners and for like render farm and data storage and things like this that are using renewable sources for energy, trying to be sustainable in a more ethical sense. But also in terms of just being sustainable on the actual technology side of things. Technology costs money, but technology should also be generating money for the company. We should be trying to save time for artists, reducing artist downtime, which is going to cost the company money as well. And the savings that we're making can then be reinvested back into technology for future projects. So in order to do that, we kind of need to measure like how much downtime do artists actually have? Where are our slownesses? Where are our difficulties? Where can we actually improve things and optimize? Once we start collecting that data and measuring it, we can try to use that to provide a cost-benefits analysis that allows us to then weigh the cost of development against the cost of the actual problem. It helps drive our priorities and helps kind of make the biggest impact quickest across the sort of production and artist space. Technical debt, I mentioned this, so doing things fast is not always the best way of doing things. If you do things fast and you cut corners, and you then have to come back to it later on, and you have to do the project properly, you end up doing a lot of things twice. You may never come back to the actual long-term plan in the first place, and you may end up keeping problems that you meant to solve, and they continue to create sort of support issues. So technical debt is important to try and minimize as much as possible, trying to actually produce good tools in the first place and trying to not have a technical debt build up. Building a platform. So, a platform is delivering the tools to the artists ultimately, but it's also delivering a framework for developers to work into. It's developing a platform for IT to be able to do software distribution, having an environment that you can actually set for projects to kind of run in that sort of determine the versions that you're using by default. It's allowing you to kind of lock down software releases so that your projects, as they're getting towards the final stages, aren't going to have bugs come into them and disrupt your projects at the final stages and cost you a lot of money when you can't really afford it. So building a platform involves quite a lot across the IT and the pipeline side. I'll go into some of the items in that area. User data, I mean, it's probably been the biggest one to solve for us. So, I mean, we've been largely legacy free. We haven't really had a pipeline in place that we've had to kind of move away from and deal with in a sort of change management sense. But user data, it's important that user data is consistent, user data is centralized, user data is synchronized between all of the different places that you might need it. So taking it from your HR systems, synchronizing it to access-based systems like Active Directory on Linux, synchronizing it to your ShotGrid sort of user records, your asset management system, your pipeline. So really taking it from HR and actually synchronizing it to all of these other places to make sure that the data is the same so that when an artist then publishes their work from their workstation, the user matches up with ShotGrid and you can actually tell who published the work. Tasks, I mean, ShotGrid stores a lot of task information, but just calling tasks anything doesn't really help the pipeline either. So setting best practices, naming conventions, and getting your pipeline to be able to enable the artist to make some choices to build up these task names in a sort of sense that makes reading the versions that you've got in ShotGrid a lot easier. And the work that the artists are actually producing as well, so the files on disk, this is data that needs to be sorted out as well. We have to look at things like storage management, transfers between locations, making sure that we're actually getting the right data to the right departments in time for them to start their tasks. Security, I mean, we're a TPN, like secured vendor, and it's important that we're actually always being security conscious. Things can be quite locked down by default, but we're trying to always look at ways to streamline how we're actually dealing with security. So trying to streamline our authorization, things like single sign-on, so you don't have to log in and change your password for 20 different systems all at the same time. Trying to use something like Google single sign-on or Okta or other technologies to try and reduce the sort of difficulty for users to actually log into their accounts. Putting access systems in place so that you can only actually touch the data that you should be touching. A lot of clients these days, it's becoming increasingly more common for a client to say, I want a list of names of everybody that worked on a particular project, and you have to prove that you've actually locked that down. So getting limited numbers of artists on a project, synchronizing the artists that have been assigned in ShotGrid perhaps to that project, and putting controlled zones around your projects on disk to ensure that people that weren't on the project don't have access to the data. And then remote security is becoming more and more common as well as studios look to hybrid working patterns, remote working patterns. It's a lot harder to kind of sort of get visibility on who's doing what with the data as well. So looking to put things like watermarks on EXRs and movies to be able to be sure where a leak has potentially come from by stamping people's usernames onto it. Connectivity, so again, that globalization aspect. We were coming from a place where we're FTPing data from one location to another because they're not connected. So we've been putting point-to-point connections into place between our Pune and our Chennai offices. We've been getting an AWS direct connection up so that we can then spool down in the cloud from London and Vancouver. And we've been joining up local user data and creating a global level where our user data can be shared so that we can build up a kind of global company directory, global email aliases, things like that. And distribution, so being able to, again, with that platform, distribute the actual systems, the operating systems, all of the basic software installations, your Chromes, your Firefoxes, Maya, Nuke, Houdini, etc. The platform that we've built, all of our tools, synchronizing those so that they're being released and then synchronized immediately around the world. Any databases, so like your wiki systems, if you've got your own pipeline system and your own database for that, we need to synchronize those databases as well. Latency between sites is massive, and you can't have somebody from Vancouver trying to publish their work into a Chennai database, so we have to try to synchronize that data to be low latency. And then synchronizing the work itself. So if you have layout happening in one location and animation happening in another, again, we have to get the upstream departments and all of their data to the destination before the task is actually starting. So we have to do this in a just-in-time sort of method. I'll quickly skip through governance because it's not the most interesting thing, but governance is making sure that we're planning our actual projects out, that we're actually thinking about it before we start doing development, and that we actually execute it in a way that makes sense so that we have all of the requirements, we've estimated the actual work, and we can start to build up roadmaps so that the production teams know exactly what we're doing when we're trying to deliver it, and they can kind of plan the work, their projects, the films, the clients around the actual roadmap that we're delivering. I'll skip KPIs, but it's essentially just measuring what we're doing there. So next steps, I mean, we've pretty much got to a point where we've got a basic platform in place now. By the end of the year, we're setting our default for all new projects to be on top of that default platform that we've set. We're looking to measure next, so measuring all of that data, we're going to get a framework in place to make it easier for developers to do application tracking, tool tracking, resource tracking, get all of this information gathered. Machine learning needs a lot of data, so we have to start measuring as soon as possible to get the data sets to be as large as possible to actually get any sort of accurate predictions out of them. Measuring, in particular, the resources, the sort of network loads, the render hours that we're doing, the disk storages for projects, measuring how often our tools are used, and ultimately measuring how much things are costing the company. Color, as we go from 2D to 3D, we need to make sure that we're actually converting from log to linear. We need to work in a linear ASSCG color space and framework. And we need to QC the color, so when the clients deliver the work to us in the first place, we need to run it through the color pipeline, get a SCQT or a version 0 back to the client, and double check that this is actually going through correctly. If you do that later on in the project, you've wasted a lot of render hours and you have to kind of start from the beginning again. USD, so to begin with, we're just looking to publish USD to start getting the actual department work authored, keeping it fairly simple to begin with and keeping it largely invisible from the user. So as we look to publish our geometry from Maya, it will automatically publish the USD without the artist having to actually input anything into it. We're also then looking to incorporate LookDev, so there's LookDev X and Material X technologies like these that you can actually utilize as well to get your LookDev in there as well. Opinions, these are really just decisions, so one-shot USD file will have all of the department's contributions in it, but as you open that USD file, each department wants to kind of interact with it differently. They want to be in a cache mode or a rig mode. They want to use different levels of detail, so it's applying a department's opinions to that document to get them set up to start working straight away. And later on, we're looking to look at collaboration and streaming. So, I mean, real-time allows us to have two departments working simultaneously, seeing each other's updates. But in a traditional linear VFX pipeline, that's very hard to kind of plan out and get working. We're used to upstream versions being reviewed and signed off before it goes down to the next stage to be sure of what we're working on. Streaming allows you to be working on something that's constantly changing. And if you work around it and then the upstream thing changes again later on, you may have to redo work. So we need to kind of carefully plan out how we plan to be collaborative in the real-time space. Automation, again, I'll skip some of the events framework, but we're looking to get a graph-based workflow. So for everything that we do, we don't want to kind of hard code this into our dispatching tools. We want the artists to have control over what they're doing. We want the departments to define their workflows. Those workflows change, so we're planning to build up graphs to show what the workflows actually are for the multiple tasks that a department's actually doing. And then we're looking to hook that to an event-based system. So as shot grid statuses change, things like this can trigger those workflows, and we can look to basically make changes upstream and automatically open up and update scenes and then pass it down the chain, so you could get all the way from a model update to a composite if you have enough templates, parameters, and department contributions already. You don't have to go through production, wasting time in communication, getting artists that should be focusing on creative efforts and getting them to waste time updating scenes that don't really make any changes. So we're looking to fully have automation end-to-end there. Machine learning then, so I mean, this is one of our major innovation pushes. We're looking to make sure that we actually have a platform in which we can actually build up machine learning, start to develop models, and have all of the right tools in place using TensorFlow, PyTorch, making sure that we've got integration, so building tools around the models to be able to deploy them inside Nuke, making sure that we've got some sort of gizmo that an artist can actually interact with and set those parameters. Looking to assess the accuracy, so we're looking to take machine learning models that are already on the market, but we're looking to compare them to the work that's already done by artists. We're trying to see how close it's actually getting to get a gauge of whether it's actually useful or not. And at the same time, we're looking to then retrain models and build our own models as well and assess the accuracy for all of these. And at the same time, we're looking to kind of get into areas that maybe haven't been developed yet. So we're looking to kind of push innovation and produce some tools that are not open on the market at all. Future goals, so real time, I mean, to begin with, it will be around round tripping. So if we're doing layout in Unreal and we're doing animation in Maya, we want to make sure that these things are hooked up. Unreal tends to prefer to work in something like Perforce. Maya is probably more integrated into your actual sort of asset management pipeline, making sure that we can synchronize versions between the two things so that the data is available for your real-time artists. Trying to determine what workflows actually fit best on the real-time side. We're actually doing Unreal training for our artists at the moment to kind of get them prepared to take on some of these workflows, and hopefully we can target specific departments one by one and guide them through what they can be doing, get them training, and get the workflows defined and build pipeline around that. And I've mentioned collaboration and streaming already, so I'll skip past that. Virtual production. We're not necessarily looking to build a full virtual production pipeline straight away. We need to get onto more traditional pipelines like an environments pipeline, a creature pipeline, a simulation pipeline on the 3D side first. But virtual production is definitely a space that we'll need to look at catching up in. We're partnering with clients that are already working in virtual production, and we'll be working with them, and they'll have virtual production and virtual cameras on their side, and we'll be at least looking to ingest those virtual cameras and assets into our pipelines. So that's where we'll be starting. But we'll be looking forwards into LED stages, simulcams, looking to push forwards as fast as we can to catch up with other studios in those areas. Machine learning, so I mean, focusing on 2D, seeing what we can do in that space. At the moment, we're training around rotoscoping to see what we can do in that area, to see if we can help artists to use machine learning and potentially feed data and parameters into a node, and you can see if we can help speed up the time it takes to get rotoscopes out. 3D, there's some interesting areas that we could be looking at just to speed things up for people. So rig deformations are quite heavy, and you often have to use things like Calamari as a LOD 100 to speed up or get rid of deformations completely, so you can actually focus on the animation and then cache it out at a higher resolution. But maybe machine learning could actually help us to get rid of that altogether and just use the full resolution in the first place and have real-time deformations in our rigs. And then one of the key areas for us is if machine learning can't get us all the way there and the end result is unusable, maybe we can actually get part of the way there and make it editable so that an artist can then pick it up and take it all away. So going back to that rotoscope example, taking that rotor shape that's come out and producing the splines that are used to actually edit it could enable an artist to kind of take it from maybe 80% to 100% and help them get through more shots. Pretty much on time. Sorry, I speak a bit fast, but I'd like to thank everybody for listening to me. I'd like to thank my management team and for putting me forwards and putting me up for this talk. I'd like to thank my marketing team as well. I didn't have necessarily a lot of interesting graphics from myself, being on a technology sort of side, but my marketing team have done a great job at making it look good. Thank you very much, everybody.